Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Breeze on NBS Television. My name is Simon Kagwanjara. In our edition of the topical discussion this morning, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis on calls for dialogue that were mooted by the Interreligious Council. Of course, these are calls that have been greeted with mixed reactions. Some have argued that actually it's not a tenable idea, while others really think it's an opportunity for the country to resolve the ongoing political impasse. Well, amidst all these questions emerging, we felt it would really be necessary for us to get deeper into what a national dialogue would mean and how significant it would be. I'm now joined by Honorable Victoria Sekitoleko, a former minister, now a member of the Women's Situation Room. Well, they were at the forefront in the aftermath of the February 18th elections in trying to negotiate a deal between President Museveni and Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye to cool the tensions. Honorable, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Where is the Situation Room? You went silent.
Like I said earlier, in life, and especially if you are a civilized person, there is a time for everything. There's a time to talk, a time to think, a time to discuss, a time to reflect. So now we are reflecting.
You're reflecting?
Yep.
What's the cause of your reflection?
You know, the purpose of the Women's Situation Room is to promote peace. The one thing we are supposed to do and do very well, we are allowed to fail in everything, but the one thing we are supposed to do and do very well is listen. So now we are listening and reflecting. And in a country where people like talking, in a country where people strive to be self-sustaining, you are better off listening because you are not feeding them. You are not supposed to think for them. So the best thing you can do if you want to be a good Women's Situation Room is listen, reflect, and then at the right time, talk about it.
The issue now taking center stage has got to do with dialogue. Just last week, the Interreligious Council came out and said it's time for dialogue. They are preparing the ground for dialogue to resolve the national impasse. What do you make of this?
You know, there is something we call culture. But the culture of Ugandans is that we practically have a way of doing things. Nearly everything we do, we have a way of doing it. So but in Uganda, when instead of somebody doing things the way they are supposed to be done, if you hear people starting to ask for a meeting, then something somewhere is not right. That is one. Two, in Uganda, whenever any meeting, even if it is just two people, are called, the first thing everybody sorts out is, what is in it for me? So for some of us, like us, the women, if you call for a national dialogue now, during 2016, where we are seeing that the rain is so intermittent, we are going to have a famine, we shall attend the dialogue as long as our issues are handled. So I'm sure everybody, for example, the Interreligious Council, which is calling for dialogue, I don't speak for them. I'm sure they have issues which they, as the Interreligious Council, would like to be handled. But I'm saying even for us women, we have issues which we would like to be handled by the national dialogue.
Well, in the aftermath of the election, in the immediate aftermath, you gave a shot at this particular initiative, bringing together the key political protagonists, and it failed miserably, I would say. What contributed to this failure? You
know, both failure and success are relative. That is one. Two, I don't know what your standard local is for you to say that it failed. But as I said, as far as the Women's Situation Room is concerned, we are now in a mood of listening and reflecting. So if you consider that a failure, you're really entitled to.
Did it hit a dead end, or did you register any success in getting Besigye to speak to President Museveni?
I don't think that was ever our job. So when, that is why I said failure or success. is relative. That was not our job. We never told anybody. I spoke to you, Mr. Angela. I never told you at any one time that that's the reason the Women's Situation Room was set up is to get Katabazi and His Excellency the President to talk. No. The job of the Women's Situation Room from the day it was set up until eternity is to make sure that there is peace. So we do not reduce the peace to two people. That is why I'm saying we are listening. And that is why I'm saying when and if this national dialogue takes place, everybody will bring their issues to the table. And that is why I'm saying that in a country where people have got the freedom to talk, when they start asking for a dialogue, it could mean that maybe the people like Parliament, which they sent to speak on their behalf, is not saying what they want them to say. It may be, it is like, if you can't do it, I want to do it myself. So that doesn't mean somebody else has failed, the Women's Situation Room has failed, so they want the national dialogue. No, far from it. What I know is that our job was to speak for peace, and at this moment I would like to thank every Ugandan for having maintained peace during and after the elections up to now. I thank you for that.
In your opinion, what is the fundamental problem that is dogging this country?
What is the fundamental problem? I think poverty. It is very, very difficult to manage poor people because as we talk now, about 38% of Ugandans live below the poverty line. If you put that in numbers, you count 1, 2, 3, 4 Ugandans, that is over 10 million Ugandans who are chronically poor. And being chronically poor means you are poor from January to December. There is no boom anywhere because in some cases, let's say if it is harvest time, you have a good time. No. These people, 10 million Ugandans are chronically poor. What do you expect from poor people? That is why whenever, for example, you have an accident, you get a huge crowd in no time. They are doing nothing, they have nothing to lose, and they have nothing better to do. So, for as long as you have that type of majority in your country, then you have a problem. For me, that is what I think is the problem. They are poor, they are hungry. And for hunger, even in the Bible, people are ready to do anything. So, for me, that is the fundamental problem. If we can work on our poverty, work on our hunger, and of course, when I talk about working on poverty, make sure everybody has good education. You know, currently there is this talk about traffic, that the reason people are causing so many accidents is because the people cannot read the signposts. Oh God, help us. When we say that put this in local languages, how many languages are we going to put? My driver, for example, is from up north. He drives me here. And quite often we go all over the country. What language is he going to read when we are in Katabazi? Let us face our problems. Take these people to school, make sure that they are educated. How come somebody is 30 years old and cannot read the signpost? Because most of these drivers are about 30 years. So for me, that is what I call poverty in the head. Then the health services. Fortunately, all of you media houses are talking about health services. We have got terrible health services. We don't have water. It is that type of misery which is making people stop from doing things which are constructive. They have not sorted out the fundamentals, which is hunger and well-being.
Well, we're now joined by Mr. Patrick Katabazi, a member of civil society and a lawyer at this, to give us his thoughts on what is trending. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. The pleasure is mine.
Well, the big issue now is about national dialogue, an idea that was mooted by the Interreligious Council. What undercurrents would you pick from this?
Yes, of course, there are quite a number of things that have been going on for quite some time. I think this effort almost started around 2011 after the elections, if I might recall, where there was a lot of impasse between different political forces. And it is an idea that has been mooted, it's an idea that has been growing. But then from my own perspective, I think there are quite a number of other things that have happened along the way. In the institutions of government, we see the challenges that are happening. You heard what my colleague was talking about.
Honorable Sekitoleko.
Yes, Honorable Sekitoleko, the issues of poverty, some issues of institutional breakdown, in my view. So I think this presents an opportunity for Ugandans, not necessarily politicians really, for Ugandans to have a constructive dialogue. First of all, by acknowledging where we have come from, where we are, and the kind of future that we would wish to have as Ugandans collectively. So,
but in real sense, do you see this happening where there can be a candid discussion on where the country is and where it is headed?
Yes.
Yes, I'm a little bit hopeful. I was a little bit skeptical at the beginning, but when I saw the Interreligious Council, the elders delivering the presidential debate, where finally the president appeared, I think these are the kinds of people, including others who may partner with them, these are the kinds of people whom I think can deliver, can bring these two and other stakeholders together. So I'm quite hopeful, and engaging, of course, by the media reports, where, of course, Dr. Katabazi, well, although he set some conditions, but said he would be willing to engage in a structured dialogue. In my view, I think this is something that can be achieved if the organizers take into account quite a number of dynamics. But as a Ugandan, I would not want to see it really as the Museveni-Besigye kind of dialogue. I want to see it as a dialogue that is representative of different faces.
Yes.
You have people in the education sector, you have people in the agricultural sector, you have people in the health sector, you have people in infrastructure, you have people in the judiciary, you have people in parliament, all these arms of government, all these sectors, civil society. So, in my own perspective, I think if we are talking about this dialogue, let it have a national character. Let us talk about issues that concern to us as Ugandans, not settling some of, in my view, some of these short-term or perhaps political misunderstandings.
Honorable Sekitoleko, what's very critical at the moment is politics.
Yes.
The politics of the day.
Yes.
That is why Colonel Dr. Katabazi also came out with an array of demands, suggesting that there should be clarity on the outcome and what should happen, and besides, the arbiters in this case should be neutral, plus other demands. Do you make sense out of all these demands?
I don't know if they are demands. To me, they look like common sense. That is one. And two, if the media is anything to go by, what I know is that after he made those demands, the president replied and said he's ready to talk anytime. So if the president thinks it makes sense, and quite a number of Ugandans are calling for it to happen, it also makes sense to me. But I want to comment on, do I think that this national dialogue can happen? I'm definitely sure it can happen. Because in the Catholic Church, there is a saying that the voice of many is the voice of God. There are so many people calling for this dialogue. And as I said, it is in our culture to have these meetings.
What are the key ingredients of a structured dialogue? At least you've been in this for some time.
Yeah. In my view, a structured dialogue should not be hurried. Two, it should be thought through properly. Then two, try to get people who are a bit seasoned and who are as far as possible neutral. Then three, agree to disagree on a few things, but at least come with, if people can come with open minds, ready to listen, ready to give and take. And then finally, be committed that whatever is agreed by the dialogue is actually respected by everybody. For me, that would be a useful dialogue, because I don't want us to have a big thing where we all come, we eat, we dance and whatever, then we go and it is business as usual. Like, to me, I wouldn't call that a useful dialogue. It would be like a dialogue of the deaf.
It's not the first time that stakeholders are giving a shot at dialogue, at national dialogue. Since 2006, there have been such arrangements, but along the way, they've been hampered either by parties refusing to attend certain meetings. There was a moment when former presidential candidates went to State House to meet President Museveni, and that was termed as dialogue to resolve the political stalemate then. Colonel Dr. Katabazi boycotted it. What do you think of this?
First of all, the word parties, especially when you are talking to me, a woman. The only party I knew which was headed by a woman was Uganda Federal Alliance, which I don't know where it is now. So what we should say is that some people went to the State House to talk to the president, and that in itself, to us Ugandans, we wouldn't view it as a national dialogue, basically because who elected these parties? Somebody wakes up, registers this party, and nearly every party is registered by a man. So these men go to State House to meet another man, and they say that is a national dialogue. For me, I'm not surprised that failed. Like I said, I'm glad that people are ready to talk, because that is what civilized people do, instead of, as opposed to fighting, which used to happen in earlier days and whatever. So I'm happy that people are ready to talk. Then too, I'm happy that when, for example, the Intelligence Council speaks, and when Katabazi spoke, because there's a newspaper where I read where he said that it is not between him and President Museveni. That if it was that, he would just get into his car, go to State House, and they talk. But this is national. So I'm really happy that everybody realizes that it is national, and they want to keep it that way.
Well, Patrick, a national outlook on a dialogue, and expecting a neutral arbiter, expecting neutral persons to preside over this. Let's be realistic. Is there any neutral person in Uganda? Or Uganda is already polarized? People belong here and there.
Now, you see, Simon, the biggest problem we have had as Ugandans is that we have developed a culture where if you are a member of opposition, you are treated as an enemy of the state. That is the culture that has been created. And what has happened is that leaders of different political forces have been blackmailed in the process. That if you had a meeting with another team from the opposite party, ultimately you have either crossed, or it is something like an abomination.
Sell out.
I want to borrow an example. Let us borrow an example from Kenya. When Raila Odinga and his team disagrees with the president on the issue of electoral commission of their country, they march to their state house and meet the president and the vice president, and they have a meeting.
Yeah.
Now here in Uganda, if like for instance Dr. Besigye moved or drove to State House and had a meeting with the president, that would be a different story.
Mm-hmm. What has brought us that far?
So yeah, I mean it's really the question of the kind of leadership that we have had over the years, where either for fear of competition or for basically selfish interests, you have somebody saying, you know, for me I can only be the one who can do this and not the other. And if you come into my territory, then you are my enemy because you are antagonizing my interests. So now, if we have a process that is organic, a process that is natural, a national dialogue that has been demanded by Ugandans, they are Ugandans who want to see certain things happening, then in my view, that kind of blackmail, all those fears that are normally faced with these leaders are likely to be away, and these people can find comfort in discussing, because it is then us who are demanding. But if you proceed in a way where it looks like there's a behind scenes arrangement for either two forces or three forces to meet, then some people will be looking at it as something like cutting deals and something like that. And I think, in my view, that is what people like Dr. Besigye are worried about.
Yeah, but top on Dr. Besigye's wish list is an independent election audit. An issue that should be looked at critically. Is it relevant?
Well, in the circumstances, he has been demanding for an independent audit, really, and he has his concerns about the same. But for me, when I look at these demands, then it looks then like a political dialogue. And if then it becomes a political dialogue, then we should discuss it as such. But if we are talking about challenges, problems that have accumulated in our society for a long time, and we want to have a constructive national dialogue, then politics could only be part of it, but not the center of the whole thing. So, well,
but ideally, can you dismiss politics, or rather can you make politics secondary, or it should be primary?
Well, in my view, as a Ugandan, like I said from the word go, me, I would want to see a national dialogue that touches on all sectors. For me, as a person, as a Ugandan, that's what I would wish to see. Because you can sort the problem of, I mean, if for instance there's a comprehensive audit, really, and it addresses the leadership problem, as an example, assuming, would it then, can we say that it has directly translated into sorting other issues that are happening in other areas? So let us be futuristic. Let us look at the kind of problems that we have and see the kind of solution that we can prescribe. I'll give you one very serious scenario. If you have a person who is required at court, where ordinarily you would expect in a properly functioning society that such a person would be represented by a lawyer, but is instead represented by a vigilante or a group of persons shouting and disorganizing the court process. Some of the kind of things that we are proposing, to what extent can they solve a problem like that one that has been growing over time, that actually seeks now to threaten the independence of another arm of government? How do you deal with that? If you have a justice of court of appeal heading a commission of inquiry that comes out with a glaring finding that 5,000 kilometer equivalent, 5,000 kilometers equivalent was stolen in 5 years. 5,000 kilometers of roads. So how does a dialogue that we are talking about be able to look at that issue and prescribe a solution?
Okay. That brings into question the feasibility of talking.
Yes. So now,
the feasibility of talking.
So now,
I need to get to Honorable Sekitoleko.
So, but as you get to her, the question of the day is, when we are talking about a national dialogue, really, what is our focus? Because you can have national dialogues on so many things. You can even have a national dialogue on agriculture. You can have a national dialogue on health. So, on this particular one, really, what should Ugandans expect?
I mean, merely talking and then people go home, can it solve anything?
No, merely talking and then people go home will not solve anything if it is not, if what happens after the dialogue is not planned. But if it is planned too, and if it is respected by all the parties, definitely we should be able to get what we wanted out of the dialogue. And just like my colleague,
what's new that would be said?
it is not like what is new that will be said, but it is how it will be said and how it will make us feel. Because quite often you will forget what I say, but you will not forget how I made you feel when I said it. You get it? So the fact that we can all come together and talk about these issues. If, for example, I can talk about agriculture. You know, the other day somebody was talking about the Uganda statistics and told us very happily that now the service sector has overtaken agriculture. Agriculture is contributing much less. So the question I asked was, is it because agriculture is stunted, or is it because the service sector is really blooming? And of course it is because agriculture is stunted. So back to your question, what will it help? Like I said, for me, this national dialogue should be all encompassing. That is one. Two, it should become a culture so that in Uganda, we stop worrying about a possibility of anybody going to the streets in order to fight. Because we shall know that the way we do things in Uganda is we talk about it. So if we can start with the overarching discussion, which brings in all these major issues, after that it could be followed maybe by a dialogue on health, a dialogue on education, a dialogue on agriculture, because that will be the new culture of doing things.
Yeah, but it's starting on a wrong foot. Already the proponents of these talks have often been branded as pro-opposition. Now, with that name calling, is the spirit really genuine?
In my view, the spirit is genuine, and I'll tell you why. Most of the time, except when I'm sitting next to you here, most of the time I'm sitting with people from the agriculture sector, and they also want a dialogue. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the president or Katabazi. I know they both do some part-time farming, but for me, I'm talking about people whose livelihood actually comes from that sector. When we sit with them, they also want a dialogue. For example, they are very, very worried about the planting material they are getting, the breeding stock they have for their cattle. That has nothing to do with who cast what vote or who wears what color.
But it's also hinged on the political question.
Exactly.
If the political question is not resolved,
Exactly.
then dialogue would be a waste.
Exactly. That is why I'm saying, let us all get together. You know, there used to be a funny saying in Chankwanzi during the time 1980 to 85. And these people who were growing their beans were complaining. So we don't want anybody going to war when our beans are about to be harvested. But before we plant the beans, we want to sit down and somehow come up with a culture of handling issues and resolving our differences. Then once that is sorted, the next thing should be to talk about our hunger. Because it's like when you come to a meeting, you have a good meeting, then after that, is there anything to eat?
How would you turn the anger or the fury that is still prevalent? I mean, the two blocks, which are inevitably key in these talks, still have that fury towards each other.
First of all, I don't know which two blocks you are talking about, but for us as farmers, for example, we are furious that we are not prioritized, because like this year 2016 with such terrible rain, by now people should be talking about what irrigation is going in which district, how many irrigation schemes have we got, what are the small scale people doing. So our anger is about people talking about issues which are not developing the country, which we are not benefiting from, instead of concentrating on areas which can lift all of us out of that poverty, which will leave very little time for talking anyway. Because if you have what you need, normally when you go to vote, you vote the right person, and when you send them to parliament, they will concentrate and prioritize your issues instead of their issues.
Patrick, one of the tenets of a national dialogue is about truth-telling.
Yes.
Do you think the president would love to hear the truth?
Yes, I would imagine so, really. But we have been talking about rules of engagement. Mm-hmm. They are also critical in getting the best outcome. For instance, now, if we are to have this dialogue, do we have an agenda that has been shared, that has been agreed upon by parties? Have we agreed upon the kind of things that we want to talk about? Have we given room for different stakeholders to give their inputs beforehand? So, because, I mean, if the dialogue is strictly based on issues, some of these issues are in the public domain. Some of these issues are in the Auditor General's reports. Mm-hmm. Some of these issues are in court judgments, for instance, of previous elections. On 2006, 2001, there's a judgment on record. 2006, there's a judgment on record. 2016, I hope, very soon, there will be a judgment on record, because the justice has promised that within 30 days they are going to produce a judgment. It was a unanimous judgment. We haven't seen it. Hopefully they will. So these are issues that, in my view, I would imagine the president will feel comfortable about, simply because these are issues that he has also, as a person, complained about. He has talked about corruption. He has also, by the way, complained about vote rigging, in as far as the political question is concerned. So these are some of the issues that that can be talked about.
The political question is rather generic. If you narrowed it down, what should be top on the agenda if you're to talk about the politics of the day?
Now, the politics of the day, in my view, one of the key things that come out strongly is conduct generally of elections. The conduct of general elections in Uganda, especially starting from 2001, in my view, to date, has been very, very, very worrying. So that's an area really of focus. And that also touches on the institution of electoral commission. What should our electoral commission look like in terms of the leadership? And good enough, we have an opportunity that the term of office for Chigunda and team is possibly coming to an end, and then we are seeing efforts of having a new commission set up. So that would also be an opportunity in the political question. Now, the other issue I would expect to come up is the issue of representation. As a Ugandan, do we need so many political leaders? What cost comes with the overrepresentation, in my view, that we are seeing? Now, and how do we address that? So for me, that is an issue that I see.
Yeah, but this sounds rhetoric based, not solution based.
Yes, and you see, and that's why Dr. Besje, in one of the conditions, he said he needs assurances that the outcomes of this meeting, of this dialogue, can be implemented. If he thinks reasonably that they cannot be implemented, that is something that he cannot participate in. So, some of the things that I'm talking about can be refined in other processes leading to that national dialogue. So that before it happens, you already have a framework of issues to talk about, and you have subjected them to a test to see whether these things can actually work in the circumstances. And in any case, some of the things can be long-term. It is not in any case true that for any dialogue to happen, that some of the things that all the things that are agreed upon can happen the following morning.
Honorable Sekitoleko, truth-telling is quite an alien subject here in Uganda. Do you think this time is likely to come out and it's not likely to hurt someone deep?
You know, sometimes when we think for other people, we are likely to make mistakes. That is one. Two, everybody has been here and most people have seen what is happening. So the only difference when we go to hear the truth is that it will be verbalized, but otherwise, most of us have seen what has been happening. As I said, most of us are...
What have you seen? We could be having different lenses.
Yeah, that is true. We have different lenses. What I have seen is the attitude of Ugandans towards certain situations has changed, and that really hurts. We have lost our culture of, for example, respect of systems. We have lost our culture of how we handle certain situations. For example, how the national cake is shared. People are now not sure what to do when you want what. That is why you see so many people fundraising for this. Somebody suffering from a headache goes to television to ask for help. They cut off my leg, I need help, and so on and so forth. It's because we have somehow lost the culture of how these things are done. Because for me, when I was young, all you had to do is go to that small hospital, large hospital, then you end up in Mulago and things would be done. So the attitude of Ugandans has to be dealt with. Then once that is dealt with, because Ugandans, we used to be really very trusting. When the president said it, we knew it was going to happen. The minister came and said it, oh God, it had to happen. So if first of all, everybody in the leadership could actually go back to being trustworthy, especially in small matters like I will come and you come. I'm in Kamoncha and you are in Kamoncha. So if our children can see what we are, tell the truth to our family, then tell the truth to our immediate neighbors, then we can have a culture of honest people. That truth used to be there, and I know we can still find it.
Now, given that background, is October timely for a national dialogue?
I don't know who is talking about October. That is one. Two, since I don't know who is organizing it, I don't know if they have gone through all those details. But if they have, like we said, they have an agenda. They have some arbiters who are neutral. They have talked to the parties, and the parties are mentally prepared. They have prepared their issues, and somehow they have some kind of common end in mind. Any time should be good enough.
In a country where the thinking has been skewed towards ethnicity, parties, and of course certain privileged populations, are talks possible from a national outlook?
I'm definitely sure talks are possible. Maybe because I'm what I am, because for me I'm from Jinja, and we call Jinja the United States of Uganda. In Jinja we In Jinja, we do not have this ethnicity and the other ethnicity. In fact, if you start that type of politics, you lose out. So, coming from there and knowing that we in Jinja can sit down and actually agree on something, I'm definitely sure if something is well prepared, Ugandans can sit down and agree.
Is there anything, any rallying point for Ugandans as a country? Or people are more bent towards their tribes and religions and, of course, political backgrounds?
Incidentally, from my own perspective, really, I don't think that Ugandans generally are more inclined to issue to tribes and that kind of thing, because if we are to look at the elections really that have happened, you have had, of course there are some isolated cases really, and those that are perpetuated by people with selfish interests. But we have people of Indian origin representing a constituency where voters, the voters that we would ordinarily say share the same characteristics with that person are less than 10 in number. You have, for instance, like in Jinja, Hare Kasigwa, whom I believe is not a Msoga.
No, not at all.
Representing a constituency in Jinja.
Yeah.
So you have Dr. Kano Chiza competing and getting quite a number of votes in other parts of the country where he's not born from, and you have seen the president equally getting the same.
Yeah.
So in my view, I don't want to say that you don't have scenarios where some people may look at tribes and some other prejudices.
Yeah.
But the overall picture is that Uganda, compared to other countries that have so many tribes, is doing relatively well in terms of creating harmony between different tribes. So I think our rallying point really, in my view, is the kind of things that concern us as Ugandans. And I want to give you one very specific example about cancer. You remember the story of the cancer machine?
Yeah.
Did you see the reaction? Would you tell that this reaction was coming from Kawale, another one was coming from Guru, because maybe the person affected was from their area? It was something on social media. It was something that really had a national character, and every corner of the country, because people are looking at it as something that is a national issue. So for me, as Ugandans, really, I tend to think, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, that Ugandans generally are not, majority of them really don't have these prejudices.
Some voices have dismissed the call for dialogue. They have said that there is every structure in place. There is parliament, there is cabinet, there are all the religious leaders, they normally interface. Would it still be relevant to hold talks with such opinion?
Yes, it is. I think we need to borrow. We need. You know, when you don't move, or we don't know what is happening in your neighbor's house, you may not understand what is happening. Like I've already given an example when there's a dispute between CORD in Kenya and Jubilee, the ruling government. These people simply marched to State House and had a meeting with the president and said, we want this. Some of them were agreed to. You remember in United States, the President Obama had a meeting with members of the Republican Party, and they actually do it quite often to talk about things of the national character, things that concern them as a country. Some of these things are happening in Ghana, as an example. You sometimes can't even tell who is in the government and who is not, because they have developed a culture where some of their things are solved really as people of the same country. You have a scenario where you have a speaker, deputy speaker is from the ruling party, the second deputy speaker is from the opposition. So at any one time, then you can tell that really the parliament, the way it is really, has a national face, because at any one time, any person from either side can superintend over the business of parliament.
Let's envisage a scenario where talks are taking place where the president has a higher ground as the president of the Republic of Uganda. And then at the back of the mind of the opposition, they're saying, maybe this would legitimize him as the president of the country. What would that mean?
When you said the president has a higher ground, we are assuming that there are two of them in a room and that the president is the president and maybe Kano. But that wouldn't be a national dialogue. That is exactly what Katabazi has said he doesn't want. And he said if he wanted to talk to the president, he would drive to State House and just talk. But for me,
I think that should come first. Getting these two to iron out their issues before they can go to a public gathering.
Do they have personal issues or national issues? Because when I was reading what Katabazi said, I didn't see any personal issue there. So they are not like their issues. If they are national issues, and if Uganda government is going to use taxpayers' money to promote these talks, it would be best if they were treated as national issues. You asked what is the rallying point. Most Ugandans want peace and respect. Do you know, we want, for one, I would love to continue to be proud to be a Ugandan. So I don't want to be associated with, like fighting or whatever. I want peace. I want to be respected. And you can't be respected unless you are educated, you are healthy, and you can feed yourself. You can't respect me if I keep begging from you. So if that is what we want, we are not going to get it just from two people talking. We, like I said at the beginning, we have parliament, we have ministers, we have the president, but somehow the people are feeling like they want to talk themselves. So all we are saying is give them space, let them talk.
Yeah, but there have been such moments where people have talked and their talk has been interpreted. You remember there was a time we had countrywide rallies for electoral reforms. The people spoke and nothing came out. So wouldn't it be a waste of time again, taking people through nearly the same exercise, and then nothing happens? It yields nothing.
Like I said,
is there a cause to really make people so optimistic?
Yeah, for me, what I said is the attitude of Ugandans has to be dealt with. We have to set up a culture which respects the public. If this is what the public wants, this is what should be done. And I think, to a certain extent, we are getting it. How? The fact that we are talking about it now, and the fact that it is, His Excellency the President has talked about it, Katabazi has talked about it, and as I said, when I go out to the farmers, everybody says we should have a talk about the way our country is being run. Earlier on you asked, we have got parliament, why don't they do it or whatever? You see, the issue with parliament is this. They are given certain guidelines around which they are supposed to work. So you cannot like fast track them and tell them that right now we want to talk about peace. The lawyers and the whatever would have to come together and somehow have this cabinet paper about peace and take it to cabinet, and then it goes to parliament. For us, for me, what I would advocate for is, these people are saying they want to talk. Let us have a structured way where they talk, and everybody is like, in Rusoga we have a saying, in Achimukovye, I told him. So let them come out, let them say it, let those people who are trying to write. And then it will be our job as Ugandans to follow up and make sure that it happens.
Well, there is this assertion, Patrick, maybe if I could bring it to your attention, that when government gives in to such dialogue, they would be negotiating themselves out of power. What do you make of this?
Well, there are some of those sentiments really across the board.
Because some of the issues are very critical. Talk about electoral reforms, talk about increment in budget, salaries and everything.
No, I don't think it's negotiating yourself out of power, really, because you have the power anyway. If you're the ruling government, you have the power anyway. And also the thing is that we as Ugandans were interested, for instance, like in free and fair elections. Yeah. And when you have free and fair elections, and you're a government that is competitive, the government that has done so well, then why would you say you're negotiating yourself out of power?
The call for electoral reforms hit a dead end. So that alone shows the will to implement anything.
Because you see, what happened was that the call for electoral reforms really, in my view, at some point seemed to have been like one-sided, where people were simply in the same room talking about these issues and talking to themselves alone. So that's why this kind of national dialogue has to be different. That we prevent scenarios where people are seated in the room and all they are doing is talking to themselves.
Yeah.
There has to be somebody speaking, another person listening, that person after listening responding, this one replying, rejoined where necessary, so that at the end of the day you have something that is moving towards concluding something that is tangible.
Aren't you dragging religious leaders into politics by promoting this kind of dialogue? Yet President Museveni has severally warned religious leaders against politics.
Yes, politics is art and science of managing society. And religious leaders historically are part and parcel of the process. If a religious leader...
Well, by Ugandan sense,
yes,
politics is not a subject for religious leaders.
No, but you see what is happening is that they are appearing to say we don't belong to any side.
Yeah.
However, we want to see two sides coming together. One of the core functions of a religious institution, in my view, is to promote harmony, peace, and reconciliation. So if that is part of the process, I think it is right there in their mandate, this kind of arrangement, that you are bringing two sides together, or you are bringing all Ugandans together. I think, in my view, there is no better placed institution to do that other than religious leaders. You saw in South Sudan as an example. You remember that meeting where the bishop was praying for these two people and being part and parcel of the processes? World over generally, including Egypt, including others, if there is a national crisis, if there are challenges that have become very prominent in the country, religious leaders, elders take the first call.
Yeah.
Would it call for a neutral arbiter who comes from outside Uganda, or Ugandans can resolve their problems internally?
I don't know if it will call for an arbiter coming from outside Uganda, but for me, what I would suggest is whoever is the arbiter should be agreed upon well before the dialogue takes place. So whether they are Ugandans or from outside, let them be accepted.
Do you see any Ugandan with a neutral character?
Oh, I see quite a number. You are sitting with one.
Would you love to preside over this dialogue?
No, I wouldn't like to. I wouldn't love to preside over it, but I'm just saying there are still those people, and that is what keeps me hopeful. When I talk to different Ugandans and I hear what they say in the privacy of their sitting rooms, there are quite a number of Ugandans who are just neutral and they are there just for Uganda.
And they frightened really to meddle into the politics of the day?
I didn't. When I talk to some of these people, I don't see any fright, because first of all, they mean well. Secondly, they are educated. Thirdly, they are experienced. Because people are people. If you know how to handle them, just like the religious people are saying, we all belong to these religions. So if whoever the arbiter was from a religion, we could have two, so that or three, so that all the religions agree. Or if the arbiter is just a Ugandan.
The first suspicion is who is funding. that also is raising a lot of suspicion, because
who is funding what?
This dialogue.
You know, it is really interesting. Some of the Ugandans you talk to when you talk about this national dialogue and whatever, the first thing they say is, when and if this dialogue takes place, nobody should be paid. So for anybody who cannot afford to sustain themselves, those are ruled out. Yeah, because this is not like going to be a money-making venture. No. At least that is what I've heard.
Yeah, but it's also bound to have logistical challenges, because the Interreligious Council is hugely funded by countries that are no longer big allies to Uganda.
For now,
doesn't that raise eyebrows?
No. For now, what raises eyebrows is something completely different. Katabazi has said the Interreligious Council has no business organizing this dialogue. So once such statements come...
That makes it complicated, doesn't it?
That makes it complicated. But to me, it is coming out at the right time. It makes you already start looking at other possibilities. Yeah.
Well, Patrick, we want to connect dots again on the complexities that would surround these talks. Could you be knowing any?
Yeah, yes, there are issues of mistrust really that are bound to arise.
True.
You know, and I have a feeling that actually even the political sides might have ever had some of these talks, although maybe not known to us publicly. So there could be an issue of mistrust. There is also an issue of implementation. You know, Uganda, we have good laws. There are so many commission of inquiry reports that are gathering dust that have never been implemented, Auditor General's recommendations that have never been implemented, and the suspicion is that this could be, if we are to proceed with it, the results could be one of such scenarios where it cannot be implemented. The other complexity that I see is this matter narrowing it down as a political contest, really. It is something that...
Inevitably.
Yes, it is something that can overshadow the process, and we may not see something tangible that comes out of it. The other complexities are people who think they own others. Political party will come and say, you know, for us, we have not sanctioned you to attend. The other one said, for you, you remember the challenge that when Dr. Rugonda was representing the government in the peace negotiations with Kony, and one of the political leaders said that one was not sent by our party. He was on his own. You remember that statement? So where some people think, you know, we are part of it, however, we're also not part of it. Those are some of the challenges. And how are we likely to be seen by the public if we go wholesale, if we are seen to be agreeing to some of the demands fronted by the other side? And you know, like, people with the opposition will have a problem. You know what normally happens if there's even reasonable suspicion that you have, like, an MP from the opposition side has met the president, even introducing him at a rally, yet that member of parliament is in his constituency and the president is visiting, and all of them are government officials. In my view, you normally see the kind of outrage that comes, that he has been bought, that he has the sellout, and something like that. So those are some of the complexities that I see in the process. But I already told you that once this national dialogue seems to be a popular will, a popular wish of the people, then leaders will have no choice.
Yeah, but there's been a similar shot. Remember iPod. iPod took an initiative again after elections to ensure that they smoothen the ground.
Yes, but also the constitution provides for a framework where parties, there's a constitutional framework where parties are supposed, whether elections or not, are supposed to be working together, supposed to have a platform, and rules are very clear. This hybrid kind of theirs of iPod, it is an arrangement that can only be viable if the teams are moving at the same level and leaving no one behind.
Are the misgivings towards these talks valid at all?
To a certain extent, they are. Basically because whenever we are discussing something, we compare to what we have seen before. So when some people come out and say this is possible, even if you have never done it, you have never seen it, you can have it. So you can organize it. Because people have not seen it before, they are skeptical. But what I want to tell Ugandans is, if you know what you want, keep asking for it until you get it. And when you get it, do with it what you are planning to do with it. If, for example, you have your peace and you have your elections another time, elect those people who you really want, because now we are in court spending so much money in courts. We are now going to spend money electing again. Somebody somewhere is unhappy. So if we could have a situation where we have this dialogue, and if we could avoid holding it along party lines, because as I have told you, for some people, their unhappiness stems from the fact that they are not represented. If for these parties, for me, for example, I don't belong to any party, so who is going to speak for me? That is why I would like a national dialogue where we shall be represented. Because especially for us, the women, we are saying nothing about us without us. We are the majority. So we should be there, and if possible, in the majority. That's what we are looking for. We are not looking for...
As women, can you be assertive enough to ensure that the outcomes are implemented?
Try us.
Well, that brings us to the end of the topical discussion this morning. Honorable Victoria Sekitoleko says, try us. Patrick, thank you for coming. Honorable, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.